Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, our distinguished audience, distinguished colleagues, partners. My name is Jerry Blenman, Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Organizational Excellence and host of today's forum. It is my honor to welcome you to this strategic forum, Leading Through Uncertainty: Why Emotional Intelligence is the New Managerial Advantage. We are convening colleagues at a time when uncertainty is no longer episodic. It is, in fact, structural, and varying levels of volatility continues to reshape alliances and markets, while economic realignments are actually redefining competitiveness. And yes, artificial intelligence is accelerating disruption across industries. Naturally, leaders across organizations globally have been pressed into an era of management that requires them to navigate rising workforce fatigue, shifting expectations, and very compressed decision cycles. In effect, leadership in this environment is being tested in new ways, with demands for strategy to evolve actually in real time and for high stake decisions to be made with sometimes incomplete information. It is a testing period for both leaders and business owners. Notably, however, the most complex challenges before leaders today are not merely technical problems to be solved with better tools or sharper analytics. There are human challenges. There are emotional challenges. There are challenges that require leadership to be emotionally intelligent, not as a soft skill, but as a strategic advantage. Emotional intelligence, colleagues, esteemed audience, enables leaders to remain grounded under pressure, adaptable amid ambiguity, and deeply human in systems increasingly shaped by automation and AI. What AI does really is support clarity when narratives conflict. It sustains resilience when volatility persists, and it strengthens people-centered decision-making at a time when trust, engagement, and retention are mission critical. Today's forum is not a tactical skills workshop. It is not about quick techniques or surface level competencies. It is the start of a strategic conversation, a thought leadership dialogue designed to examine why emotionally intelligent leadership has become essential to navigating complexity while sustaining performance, both in business leadership and institutional direction. Today's session invites reflection. It invites executive insight, and it also invites a deeper examination of the human dimension of leadership in uncertain times. The question before us is not whether uncertainty will continue, it will. The question is, what type of leadership will rise to meet it? And will that leadership embrace the deep techniques and requirements of emotional intelligence? With that, I am pleased to begin our strategic conversation with Aayusha Shrestha, Director of International Programs, Soft Skills AHA. And she is also an emotional mastery mentor who's passionate about emotional intelligence, soft skills, and personal professional transformation. As the Director of International Programs at Soft Skills AHA, she leads global initiatives to train and mentor national and regional directors to equip students and professionals with the skills essential to thrive in today's AI-driven world. As well, she is a global digital educator and trainer, an entrepreneur, and a learning and development leader. It's an honor to have Aayusha speak to us this morning on this important subject of leading through uncertainty. Please, we invite you to post any questions, comments in the chat box. Towards the end of the session, Aayusha will respond to any questions, and we will have a bit of a conversation during the last 10 to 15 minutes. So please use the Q&A portal and post any comments. We will also place in the chat a much more extended profile of Aayusha as well as myself, so that you can read a little bit more about our background. Thank you so very much. And Aayusha, it's all over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for such a warm welcome. Firstly, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you're joining us from. And I am genuinely happy to be here today because of the topic that we are going to be covering today. Just the sheer importance and the relevance of this topic. Leading through uncertainty, why emotional intelligence is the new managerial advantage, especially in this age where uncertainty is the new normal. Now, I know that your calendars are packed, and I know that you probably have 101 things to do today, but the fact that you have carved out time to be here today tells me something very crucial. It tells me that you are feeling it too. The weight of leading in a world that just won't stand still. You're being asked to lead teams through changes you didn't see coming, to make decisions with information that's incomplete, to project confidence when you're honestly not sure what the next quarter will bring. And here's what no one really talks about. That can be very exhausting. Now, it's not because you're not capable. It's not because you lack the skills, but because the old playbook, the one that said plan, execute, adjust, doesn't work when the plan itself becomes obsolete before you even finish writing it. So let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. How do you lead when you don't know what's coming next? Now, I'm asking you this question not in some vague philosophical sense. I actually mean right now, this week, with your actual team. Because you've got brilliant people, you've got solid strategy, and you've got great experience. But you're also dealing with regulations that shift without warning, AI that's rewriting job descriptions monthly, competitive landscapes that change overnight, and market conditions that make your quarterly forecasts obsolete before the quarter even starts. And here's the uncomfortable part. Your team is looking to you for certainty that you simply don't have. So what do most of us do? Whether you're a VP, a director, a department head, a general manager, or a senior leader, we perform certainty anyway, meaning we showcase certainty even though we are not certain ourselves. We say things like, everything will be fine. We project confidence we don't fully feel. We communicate clarity we don't entirely have. Why? Because we think that is what leadership looks like. But here is what's actually happening. When you perform certainty in an uncertain world, your team stops thinking. They stop sharing problems because they wait for you to tell them what to do, because you have signaled that you know. And in a world where the rules keep changing weekly, that can be fatal. And so today, we are going to talk about a different way to lead, one that doesn't require you to have all the answers, but equips your team to think clearly when nothing is certain. Now, this isn't about being nice or soft. I am actually talking about a competitive advantage here. And when you look back, for most of our careers, the model actually looked like this. We would do annual strategic planning, we would make quarterly adjustments, and we would execute month to month. This was the formula that we were using. Why? Because the assumption that we had was that disruption is occasional. Disruption happens once in a blue moon, while stability was the baseline. But now, what if I tell you that that has flipped? That has flipped to where disruption now is the baseline, is the constant, whereas stability is now is occasional. Stability is exception. Now, according to the UN's trade analysis from September 2025, this uncertainty has become a major source of global instability. Now, we try to manage probability. We still try to model scenarios, and we still try to build backup plans. But we have to accept that we can't eliminate uncertainty. And yet, we keep pretending that we can. And this is the trap that we are all in. Most of us respond to uncertainty by performing certainty. So we say things like, we've got this under control. The plan is clear, let's just execute. Trust the process. Now, the main question to ask here is, why do we keep saying these things? We keep saying these things because we think our job is to give our teams certainty. And the interesting fact is, the more the uncertainty, the more we compensate by performing certainty. And we think that if I show doubt, they will panic. And if I admit I don't have all the answers, I will lose credibility. And so we fake the confidence. We pretend we are certain when we're clearly not. No one is. And we rush decisions we should probably sit longer with. And here's what happens. Our team picks up on it. They mirror that false certainty. They stop raising concerns early, and they wait for us to tell them what to do, because we have signaled that we already know. So that is when innovation stops, flexibility disappears, and issues begin to grow in the dark. So what is the cost that we end up paying? We end up losing the very things that we were trying to achieve: performance, innovation, and retention. And when leaders perform certainty instead of creating space for real thinking, we end up losing everything that's precious to us. And that is precisely the reason why emotional intelligence matters now more than ever before. And there are three converging forces that make this even more urgent. The fact that AI is taking over operational tasks, the fact that uncertainty is now the new normal, and the fact that your team members expect you to be emotionally intelligent. Team members expect their leaders to be emotionally intelligent. Now, AI is taking over operational tasks. We are seeing this happen all around us. So the routine work is being automated. And what's left for your team is the work that machines can't do, making human-centered judgment calls, figuring out problems where the path forward isn't clear, collaborating across functions, and adapting to constant change. Now, none of that can happen without emotional intelligence. Now, we have established that uncertainty is the new normal. So strategic plans are written annually, but disruptions now happen quarterly or even sometimes weekly. So leaders cannot predict outcomes, but here's what they can do. They can start building resilient teams. Next, team members expect their leaders to be emotionally intelligent. And so when we talk about team members, of course, we're talking about Gen Z and millennials, because they are the ones who make up the majority of the workforce. Now, you have to remember that they don't accept, please leave your emotions at the door. Don't bring your emotions into the workplace. They are not going to accept that. And here's what they're looking for. And remember, they will leave if they don't find these aspects in your company. First, and this is so important, psychological safety. They want to work in environments where they can speak up, admit mistakes, ask questions, and challenge ideas without fear of being judged or punished. Next, they are looking for transparent leadership. They expect honesty about challenges, not sugar-coated optimism. And remember, they can handle bad news, but what they can't handle is feeling like they're being lied to. Next, purpose over paycheck. They want to understand how their work contributes to something far more meaningful. Just do what I tell you to do. If you say these kind of things, of course, that is not going to cut it. Next, they are looking for leaders who are human. Not looking for leaders who are perfect. They're looking for leaders who are human. They actually respect leaders who admit when they don't know, who acknowledge stress, and who model vulnerability. They don't expect you to have all the answers because they know that you're not a superhuman, and they also know that we are living in an uncertain time, and this is an uncertain era. So what they do expect you to be is to be real. And next, they're looking for boundaries and balance. Please remember that they have watched older generations burn out. they actually do want to work hard. It's not that they don't want to work hard, but not at the expense of their mental health and personal lives. And remember, these are all the qualities of emotional intelligence and qualities of an emotionally intelligent leaders. And remember, this isn't entitlement. Whatever they're expecting their leaders to have, this isn't entitlement, right? This is a generation that has watched the 2008 recession, lived through a pandemic, and saw loyal employees get laid off via Zoom calls. Now, they learned early on that companies won't take care of them. So they're just learning to take care of themselves. So, what is the truth that we need to accept? The fact that your job is not to provide certainty when there isn't any, but your job is to build an environment where your team feels safe, enough to think clearly when nothing is certain. And I want to talk about a little bit about neuroscience. Now, when you are not feeling safe, right? So when your team members are not feeling safe, that is when, in the brain, the part of the brain which is called amygdala is active. That part of the brain is also called the emotional brain and is responsible to have this fight or flight reaction all the time. So imagine when the environment of your company is not safe, your team members are in that constant fight or flight response, the reaction, right? And that is when their nervous system is not calm. And so it is about activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the resting and being calm. So the rest and calm, aspect of you, that is called parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for that. So your job is to create such an environment so that when your team members feel safe and when their parasympathetic nervous system is activated, that is when the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for clear thinking, gets activated. So how do you create such a safe environment? The only way that you can do that is through emotional intelligence. And again, I'm not talking about emotional intelligence as just this feel-good concept or a nice to have something on the side. I am actually talking about emotional intelligence as an operational capability that drives performance. Because remember, emotional intelligence is being intelligent with your emotions. But still, there is this misconception that when we talk about emotional intelligence, people think that it is about being emotional with your intelligence. It is not. It is just the opposite. It is about being intelligent with your emotions. It is about being able to regulate your emotions. But before doing that, you have the ability to even understand your emotions. So it is so much deeper than just being emotional. And also, here's the reality. When the external world is unpredictable, the most reliable thing your team has is how you show up emotionally. So imagine when everything shifts, when strategies pivot, and when plans literally fall apart, your team is watching you. Are you calm or are you spiraling? Are you open or are you defensive? Do you create space for people to think, or do you just need them to comply? Because remember, they are not looking to you for solutions at that moment. They are looking to see your emotional state first. And if there is one key statement and one key point that I want you to take from this webinar, even if you forget everything else, just one key takeaway is this. Remember, your emotional state becomes the environment your team members are working in. Let us make this land. Your emotional state becomes the actual environment your team members are working in. It's not this fancy office that might be exciting for them at first, but over time, it is your emotional state that becomes the real environment for your team members. And that real environment is created by you. And so why are we even here today? And I want to mention that this webinar isn't about where I tell you, manage your stress and be more resilient. This webinar is about how you compete when you can't predict what's next, because the rules of the game has changed. So this webinar will be looking at three major areas. Today's session will be covering the first two, and the third area will be covered in the second session. So today we will be covering the first and the second, which is, does emotional intelligence drive business results? Now, the reason why we're asking this question is because, there's still this notion that emotional intelligence is this something that is nice to have, and it doesn't really lead to business results. I want to actually break that notion today. So I will be making a business case when it comes to emotional intelligence, and we will also be looking at what are high-performing organizations doing differently when uncertainty is the new normal. In this second session, the second webinar, part 2 of this webinar, this is where we will be understanding emotional intelligence and what you can start doing from Monday itself to build emotional intelligence in your team. Now, in that session, I will actually be helping you to have a clear understanding of emotional intelligence, and also will be sharing with you what emotional intelligence is not, because it's crucial for you to have the correct understanding of emotional intelligence before you correctly implement it with your team members and in your company. So now let's look at the first question. Does emotional intelligence drive business results? Now, I know some of you may still be skeptical. Emotional intelligence sounds soft and very intangible, and perhaps quite hard to justify in a board meeting. So that is why I want us to look at what the most recent peer-reviewed research tells us. So there was a 2022 analysis published in Frontiers in Psychology that reviewed decades of research from 1990 to 2020, and here's what jumped out. Emotional intelligence accounts for about 18% of the difference in how well employees handle job stress. In simple terms, stress resilience in the employees went up by 18%. Now think about what that means for your organization. Now, we already know that stress drives people to leave. And when we're talking about Gen Z and millennials, they will not stick around longer. like the previous generations, right? So stress drives people to leave. And replacing someone costs you roughly around 6 to 9 months of their salary in things like recruitment, training, and lost productivity. And stress also drives sick days, disengagement, mistakes, and even conflict. So if your stress problem can be addressed through emotional intelligence, now that is a retention and cost saving strategy, is it not? Next, let's look at performance. Now, the same research found that emotional intelligence accounts for about 8% of why employees perform better than others. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, 8%, that's quite low. I was imagining much more than that. Now, I want to give you a little bit of context here. And when we talk about 8% and when we're talking about emotional intelligence, remember, it has a compounding effect. So in a company of 100 people, that 8% difference compounds across every decision, every interaction, and every team dynamic. So it's the difference between an employee who shuts down under pressure versus one who stays clear-headed, between someone who creates conflict versus someone who de-escalates it, between a team that surfaces problem early versus one that doesn't share them until that thing turns into a bigger issue. So and here's what makes this even more relevant for you as leaders. A 2023 BMC Psychology review analyzed 104 studies across 2 decades and confirmed what high-performing organizations already know. When leaders have high emotional intelligence, the impact multiplies across their entire team. Why? Because as a leader, your emotional intelligence doesn't just affect your performance. It affects everyone you lead. And next, training actually works. Emotional intelligence training actually works. A 2024 review published in BMC Psychology analyzed workplace emotional intelligence training programs. And the conclusion that these programs actually work. So the research shows that trained employees perform about 17% better on emotional competence measures compared to untrained employees. And also, the benefits actually lasted. They were still measurable more than 3 months after the training ended. Now, this isn't just a temporary boost from a motivational workshop. Emotional intelligence training actually sticks and it compounds. Let me also quickly share what the emotional intelligence industry itself is reporting. So EBW Global, EBW, which literally stands for Emotions and Behaviors at Work. Now, this is a company that specializes in business emotional intelligence assessment, right? So they found that organizations with emotionally intelligent leaders are 35% more likely to achieve above average financial returns. And according to Gallup study cited by EBW Global, employees who feel their managers are emotionally intelligent. So if you are emotionally intelligent, your team members will be 4 times less likely to leave their jobs. Now we have almost reached the end of this session, and right now I will be talking about the second area, which is What are high-performing organizations already doing differently when uncertainty is the new normal? So let me tell you about one of the most comprehensive studies on team performance ever conducted. Of course, it was conducted by Google way back in 2012. Google launched something called Project Aristotle. Now, they studied over 180 teams trying to figure out just one thing. What separates exceptional teams from average ones? Now, I'm sure we all have pondered over this question time and time again, but they looked at everything from seniority, education, backgrounds, team size, you name it. And here is what surprised them. The composition of the team mattered far less than how the team worked together. And they found 5 key dynamics that were essential for effective team performance. And the most important factor that jumped out was, again, psychological safety. In simple terms, what does it mean? Can your team speak up without fear? Can they admit mistakes? Can they ask questions that might even sound dumb? And can they challenge the status quo? The other key dynamics that they found, other than psychological safety, was dependability. So are team members getting things done on time? And do they meet expectations? Structure and clarity. Are team members given clear roles, plans, and goals? Again, meaning. Remember, your team members view work as something which is personally important to them. And the fact that it needs to have impact. So your team members think that their work matters and does create change. So they don't view work as just this activity or a task that needs completion. And there were 2 other critical factors that emerged. First, equality in conversational turn-taking. Simply what this means is, in high-performing teams, everyone should get a chance to speak. It should not be dominated by the loudest voice or the most senior person. And second, high social sensitivity. Team members are actually tuned into each other's emotions and needs. And here is the implication for you as a leader. The smartest people in the room won't perform unless they feel safe to contribute, to challenge ideas, and to admit that they are uncertain. And your job isn't just about hiring talented people. Your job is to create the conditions where that talent can truly thrive. Now, let me show you what this looks like at scale. And I call this a scale of $300 billion to a $2.5 trillion. We are talking about the Microsoft transformation. So when Satya Nadella became the CEO of Microsoft in 2014, the company was actually struggling back then. They were losing relevance in mobile, they were behind on cloud computing, and they were stuck in internal politics and siloed teams. And at that point in time, the culture, the overall culture, was actually very rigid, to the point Nadella called it a know-it-all culture, a know-it-all mindset. But after Nadella came into the picture, what did he do? He used the power of emotional intelligence. He brought about a cultural transformation through through growth through growth mindset. So he introduced the idea of moving from a know-it-all culture, know-it-all mindset to a learn-it-all mindset. Now, what does this look like in practice, right? So instead of your team saying, we already know our customers, you actually start asking, what did we learn about our customers this week? So it might be a small shift in language, but that changes everything about how people show up. Next, he introduced empathy as business intelligence. He made empathy as a core leadership competency. He views it as a source of business innovation. Because think about it, innovation comes from understanding customers' unmet, unarticulated needs. And here, his personal story also matters. So his son was actually born with cerebral palsy, and that experience fundamentally changed how he understood responsibility and what it means to genuinely show up for others. And that is what he brought into how he leads. Next, he brought psychological safety through leader vulnerability. So Nadella started opening meetings by listing out what he wanted to learn, not what he already knew. He encouraged leaders to say, I don't know. And what could I be missing? What am I missing? Now, why does this matter? When the most senior person in the room admits uncertainty, it gives everyone else permission to think out loud, to challenge assumptions, to surface problems early, and to be creative, active, and innovative. And so, what were the results? Market value increased from $300 billion to $2.5 trillion. Azure became a cloud computing leader. Employees embraced the growth mindset, transforming Microsoft into one of the most respected places to work. And remember, this wasn't achieved through new technology or acquisitions. It was achieved through how people felt safe enough to use their intelligence. And this is the power of emotional intelligence. So through this session, I have made the business case for emotional intelligence and established why emotional intelligence is your competitive managerial advantage. Remember, emotional intelligence will soon be table stakes, meaning they will be baseline requirement for all companies. So the organizations investing in emotional intelligence development today, measuring it, training it, rewarding it, will have a significant head start. And that is why it is so crucial for you to understand emotional intelligence before you are able to correctly implement it for your own teams. And so we look forward to seeing you on the second session. And thank you all so much for your time and for your willingness to learn and evolve. Over to you, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Aisha. And what a session. I made quite a few notes here, and I see there's at least one question, and I hope that there are several others from our audience who I can see is fairly diverse in terms of location. But you spoke about the cost of managing uncertainty with with um, within a relatively uncertain space, and that captured my attention. One of the other things that you touched on was that of starting to build resilient teams. And what came to mind was, how do I build a resilient team that can grow with me emotionally as a leader? And of course, I like the Monday morning. I know we're going to deal with that in the next session, but I certainly do like the Monday morning model, the model that says um, come Monday will be functioning differently. But let's address a question raised here by James. When it's dominated, and I believe he means the environment is dominated by the loudest employee, are there any suggestions or opinions on how to not let your emotions as an employer escalate the situation?
Hmm. Wonderful question. Yes. So it is, of course, difficult initially because there is already this team dynamics that's taking place. And that is why emotional intelligence training, I often say that needs to happen as a group because it is a culture that you create in the company. Until a culture of emotional intelligence is not created from even top down and horizontal, it should be both vertical and horizontal. So so the question, was it about employee or employer, Jerry?
The question is about the employer, how the employer could not, find themselves escalating with the tension that's occurring in the organization.
Yes. So again, as someone in that leadership position, it is the only way that you can not escalate situations is by being emotionally intelligent, and that is why I often say that it is the leaders who first need to undergo these training sessions first before the employees, and it's the leaders who create this culture. And the only way that you can be intelligent with your emotions is to be able to regulate your emotions. So emotional intelligence, which I was going to cover in the second session, is essentially about, first, it's always about self-awareness, then it is about self-regulation, then third is about social awareness, and fourth is about relationship management. So remember that when we are talking about emotional intelligence, we are dealing with all four simultaneously, right? And a lot of times what ends up happening is that we are either caught up with just what I am feeling, and therefore I will speak my truth, and not really think about the social awareness or read the room or want to even manage the relationship. And or what we end up doing is we end up thinking so much more about relationship management that we do not want to even express our own thoughts and our expressions, right? So we keep ourselves down and we prioritize the relationship. So it is about the balance of both. So there's so much more, you have to actually get into the detail. And I really hope, I would request the participant to please join us in our second session. And that is where I will break it all down for you.
Yeah. Thank you so very much. We have a second question here from Rachel. It says, so I understood that as an employer, you should include your team in some decision making. What areas should you include them in to build morale, and how should you go about it without jeopardizing your role as the leader?
The simple rule that I follow and the simple rule that needs to be followed is just look at them as humans, you as a human, not this whole aspect of being a leader and they are the team members or they are subordinates. It is time that we all accept that we are all on the same boat here, which is the boat of uncertainty. And we remember I mentioned about utilizing or helping your team members to thrive. So being able to be honest, really, and remember, modeling vulnerability is so crucial in today's day and age. So it is just about sitting and having an honest conversation, right? So it is not about, okay, what do I mention to them and what I don't mention to them. I think those days are gone. It's about being in a team, and you are there not to manage your team members. I often say this, that managers, we think that we have to manage our team members. We're actually not managing them. We can't manage anyone. Even in our family, even in our family dynamics, you can't really manage or control anyone. The only thing you can do, however, is to inspire them and to influence them. That's all you can do.
So,
Yeah.
so I seem to hear you saying, Aisha, that leadership is really um, a partnership between an individual and other individuals that they are carrying out an organization's mandate with. That leadership is actually being forced into a space that respects employees as partners. Is that what I'm hearing?
Wonderful. Absolutely. And in fact, I would go a step further and I would say that it is not just leadership. I would call that conscious leadership. It is time now for us to become conscious leaders. That means be attuned to what's being able to, that is where social awareness comes in, where you're able to read the room, you're able to be aware of your own emotions and be able to regulate your own emotions and to be able to regulate the emotions of others. So it is about being conscious. And yes, it is about partnership, because again, we are talking about Gen Z and millennials, and they are expecting. See, it's also about what they are expecting from their leaders. And in a way, they're not even looking at them as leaders, because the concept of leadership is, okay, I don't know, you know it all, and I'll follow you. So I think the term leader and in itself needs to be questioned in today's day and age. It is not leadership, it is partnership. Yes, for sure.
Yes, and Jim's raising further using a word that I totally love, inspiration. And
Yeah.
I hear him saying that leadership really is about inspiring others. Conscious leadership
Oh
is
yes.
inspiring others perform at their maximum. And if we could but embrace that as an important concept, I believe
Oh yeah.
that it will, change the environment in so many organizations. As a matter of
Yes.
not only in organizations, but within the collective, idea of leadership are those who serve in public roles and are leaders, at the national level. And this matter of conscious leadership that inspires communities, inspires the nation, inspires opportunity, resonates so very strongly with me. And clearly, that's a mindset that has to be captured within the context of their particular emotional maturity. How emotionally mature are you in the circumstance of the day to respond appropriately so that you don't subtract from this space, but you add to this space. You become an inspiration and not a demotivator or a subtractor. The opportunities for development, be it, at the national level or within the context of an organization. So, I think that these are very important considerations, especially as you said, given the type of dynamics that we are working with in the world where change is occurring every day. You made a statement as well, Aisha, that uh, moving from know it all to learn it all is very important in the context of this conversation on emotional intelligence, moving from know it all to learn it all. I wonder if you could expand a little more on that. I mean, I have some thoughts
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
which I don't want to, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
that calls for a measure of humility. And it
Yes.
means that individuals, will turn to what they consider employees and says, I don't have the answer. What are your thoughts? You just came out of university. Can you build this? Can you? I don't know. You tell us.
No, see, it's just this culture and this reality that we, I think, need to create the reality of truth and just being honest. Because now what's happening is that we are all, like I keep saying, that we are all on the same boat, which is everything is changing. If anyone tells you, hey, you know what? I know what is going to happen 1 year from now, please don't believe that person because nobody knows. Nobody knows what the shift is going to happen. And so at this juncture, if you then come out as a leader and say, hey, I know everything, and again, performing certainty that I kept on trying to build that case as well, that will only jeopardize situations because right now it is because see, earlier we also have to remember that before AI came around and before technology really, shot up, what used to happen was a lot of our times used to go into the technical tasks, right? So you just had to bury your head and then actually work, and it was all about task, to be very honest. But now, since technology has advanced and AI is now taking over all the technical aspects of work, now that has therefore, now it is about being human. So when you start now from down, looking down at your desk to looking up into the eyes of your team members, into the eyes of the conscious leader or inspirer, right? That is when you connect. You're forced to connect. And now we are beginning to ask these very crucial questions as to what true leadership is like. And now we can finally be humans and not be reduced to being like a robot working. Now it's about finding the highest, like our participant had mentioned, our attendee had mentioned about finding the highest version of yourself, even in the workplace, for sure.
Yeah. And I see Jackie also weighed in and, on this know-it-all question from experience, most employers exercise the know-it-all style of leadership. How can we get leaders to change this style and become a vulnerable leader? And I believe you addressed that in part, a few moments ago. And I particularly like the term she used here, vulnerable leader. And I
Yeah,
wonder,
yeah,
vulnerable
truly.
leader, a very powerful term. And I wonder if
Yes,
you actually comment on that,
yeah,
because EI really is about some exposure of
yes,
yourself to your
yeah,
team. Yes. Can you
yes.
comment?
Of course. I personally also believe that true strength comes when you are actually able to accept your weaknesses, and not just accept your weaknesses, be ready to look and to be vulnerable in front of others and say, I don't know when you don't know. And that is when you will want to learn. That is what creates the culture of learning. And I want to bring in a bit of neuroscience here as well. So there was this study which was conducted, and they found that when mistakes are made, there is, so what happens in the brain is that there is this high signal of sorts that that happens, which is called an ERN signal, right? So when mistakes happen, remember there's a high signal, and then that is the brain's way to make you look at that very thing and say, hey, this is worth learning. There's something worth learning here. And immediately after that, there is a lower signal that takes place, which is called the PE signal, right? Now, the PE signal is when you're now learning. that signal is helping you to learn. So those with growth mindset has a balance of both ERN and PE signals. So we were designed to make mistakes and learn, and that is how we evolved, right? But those with fixed mindset, for those individuals, the ERN and PE signals were less, because what happened was that the moment there was a mistake, the ones with fixed mindset, they just shut down. And that is when the ERN and P signal was almost like
Wow.
flat. So
Wow, 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 wow. That's amazing. And I like it. We were designed to make mistakes and learn. We were designed to make mistakes and learn. Do you know that that's not what is actually taught in classrooms? It's not what
exactly.
is, promoted in the workplace. People
Yeah.
make errors and they are penalized. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that we have been designed to make mistakes and learn. And that resonates so very deeply as well. And I almost hear you saying that the leader who appreciates this type of, developmental structure, who can appreciate these, very solid theories of life, is the leader who would probably be more compassionate and work with individuals, helping them to grow and to become, solid citizens. And I have
Yeah.
often said, if I cannot leave the world better than when I came in, then I have failed. And that is especially important from a leadership perspective. I just have one more question, because we are pretty much onto the the 11:30 hour. You spoke earlier about building safe environments where the team feels safe to think clearly. I don't
Yeah.
know if you have done any extensive research to indicate, what may be a percentage of companies that are infested with an environment where thinking is not clear because the environment is overwhelmed with other than emotionally intelligent leadership. I don't know if you have seen any of that, but how prevalent is that prevalent across the world? Just to feel, what the space.
Mhm. Now, I haven't, of course, we saw Google and we saw Microsoft, but because for me, we were looking at, I was wanting to look at what are the topmost in organizations already doing. Now, because they're already doing that, and we kind of already know that even if companies are not investing in research like these and to find out how to create safe spaces or to ask these crucial questions, they will be forced sooner or later, right? So, but because these top industries and organizations are already doing it, that gives them a kind of a direction. So, emotional intelligence now more and more is also, by the way, is being studied by neuroscience. Right? Earlier, it was not taken seriously. So, parallelly, that is also happening. Right? So, and there's such interesting revelations that are coming out about emotions. And I mean, come on, we're all humans, and we can't. It's it's funny how we came this far by keeping aside emotions. But I get it, professional world, you just work. I mean, you just become robots, but then you end up having so many mental health issues. And I think the fact that we're even living in an era where we talk about mental health so openly now is beautiful. And I think we're headed in the right direction. And the the only way now for organizations and for individuals, for your own personal life as well. Please look into emotional intelligence. Please, learn more about emotional intelligence. Please see what's happening in neuroscience, right? So that will help you to understand yourself, because the first pillar of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. One interesting thing I wanted to mention is this psychologist called Lisa Feldman Barrett. She actually coined this term, which is emotional granularity. What that means is to be able to label your emotions in itself makes you understand so much more about yourself. So when we say, I was angry, can you narrow it down? Try and find the right vocabulary, because were you furious or were you hurt, right? There's a difference. And
Yeah.
the
Wow.
emotional granularity, if you're able to name and label your emotions. So when you feel this intense emotion, usually we are, of course, talking about negative emotions here in this context, but when you're able to label your emotions, you're able to be more aware of yourself. Can you imagine, in Japan, there is actually a word which describes that awkward feeling, that uncomfortable feeling you feel when you get a bad haircut. There is even a word for that, you know? So if you don't find a word in the English language, please feel free to look at your local language and find that, try to find that word and label your emotions. And there's so much to learn about yourself and the world around you. And we're just getting started. And I think we're in this beautiful era for sure. I'm always an optimist, so I'll always look at the bright side for sure.
Yes, yes. This has been excellent. And to those of you who have joined us, this is just but the first part of a three-part series on leading in uncertainty. Now, we have just posted into the chat or a thought exercise, which we want to encourage you to complete. It'll probably take no more than 3, 5 minutes unless you want to spend a lot of time on it. And it will inform on a number of areas specific to what, the perception is with regards to EI. You will get a copy of this report, but it will also inform our conversation in our second webinar forum. We will announce that date, in due course. In addition, those who have continued throughout the session, we will extend some private invitations to something of more of a, safe group, where we just have a conversation on some of these findings as well. And so we want to encourage you to please, head over to that page and complete the perception exercise. Okay, I see, please provide the link. Let's provide that for you very quickly. And do note as well that there is some very important considerations with regards to us developing as individuals and building spaces. The I'm sorry. We'll get that link. The link will come out to you. The link will come out to you immediately after the session. I think it is not linking on the page here. We'll get that out to you. Not to worry, we'll get that out to you very shortly after we hang up from this session. So check your emails for this. And you will also have a copy of the recording. But it's so important for us to be conscious of the space we create. That's the point I was making. And as Aisha said, your emotional state becomes the environment that teams work in. I leave us with this quote this morning, colleagues. The greatest question confronting us as we consider the state of excellence in organizations of varying sizes and sectors is not how well we are performing. The greatest question that merits a response is what did we do yesterday, if indeed we did anything that perhaps can be done better today to shape a healthier tomorrow. What has been done today, yesterday, and what will be done tomorrow to shape a healthier tomorrow? That's in your power to do. Thank you so very much for joining us. Apologies about the link for the survey, but you'll get that. Thank you so very much as well, Aayusha, for sharing such, an impactful session with us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.